We have Rizèl Scarlett today. She's a developer advocate at GitHub. She moonlights as an advisor at G Code House, an organization aimed at teaching women of color and non-binary people of color to code. Rizèl believes in leveraging vulnerability, honesty, and kindness as means to educate early career developers. Her favorite pastimes are watching anime, crying at the gym, and annoying her husband. So let's give it up for Rizèl Scarlett with Level Up with Copilot.
Awesome. Oh, cool. I can see myself on the screen. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry that I couldn't be here with you in Hungary, but I hope you're having a good time. And I know they said that we're getting to the end of the conference, so don't worry if you're starting to feel sleepy. This talk is going to be a little bit more exciting for you. I do like audience interaction, and I know that's hard in a hybrid setting, so you can just answer on your own, even though I won't be able to hear or see you. But my first question to you before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this talk is, the other day I wrote this tweet that says, wrote this tweet with Copilot. I want to know if you think it's true or false, if you actually think I wrote it with Copilot, or if I just literally just wrote the tweet out. So just even you can just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down, even if I can't see you, or just keep it in your head. All right, and I have one more question after that for you to think about as well. And the other question is, do you think you can use GitHub Copilot to cultivate your engineering career at any level? True or false? Or cap, as some kids would say. Cool. All right. So today we're going to answer those questions along with a couple of other questions. We're going to figure out what GitHub Copilot is, if you haven't heard of it before. We're going to figure out how to leverage GitHub Copilot. We're going to explore if it can level up your career at any level. I'll talk a bit about how it's personally helped me, and then we'll explore if you can actually write tweets with Copilot, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. So before we do that, just really quickly, I know we did an intro of me, but more intro, I guess. My name's Rizel. I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. I was a software engineer before that for 3 years. I'm an advisor I was a director at an organization called G Code, which introduces women of color and non-binary people of color to tech. And I'm a little bit addicted to social media. So if you are also on different social media platforms, you can connect with me at Black Girl Bites. That's my handle on Twitter, Instagram. I know they have Blue Sky now, Mastodon, that's also my handle, dev.to and Hashnode, because I write a lot of blog posts. And on Twitch, my handle is Black Girl Bites 1. I actually got locked out of my account because I forgot my password. All right, so let's get back to the actual stuff that you care about. What is Copilot? It's an AI peer programmer that helps you write code faster with less work. And also, if you see me looking to the left, I have 2 screens, and this screen has my slides on it. So I'm focused on y'all still. And okay, sometimes when you use Copilot, at least when I've used Copilot, it can feel like magic. But I want to be honest with y'all, it won't always spit out perfectly well-written, up-to-date code. Sometimes it may have a larger data set of an older API version, and I may be putting that out. So I always put that out to people because I like to be honest with people, and I want to encourage people to, even though there's generated code there, don't just trust it blindly. Go ahead and review it, just as you would with a human peer programmer. You would review their code, so review the AI's code as well. If you're still having a hard time imagining how Copilot works and you haven't used it before, it reminds me of the Smart Compose feature in Gmail. If you've ever used Gmail or Google Docs, you start typing and it has some predictive text here, just like it in this picture, where someone's writing an email to Jacqueline about Taco Tuesday, and they say, "Hey, Jacqueline, haven't seen you in a while." And Smart Compose is "and I hope you're doing well." GitHub Copilot provides this very similar user experience, except for code. Okay, so if it's not magic, what is really happening? Under the hood, GitHub Copilot is drawing context from your comments and your code, and it's suggesting individual lines and full functions instantly. It's being powered by something called OpenAI Codex. And when GitHub Copilot first came out and we were talking about OpenAI Codex, I was really new to GitHub, so I was like, I don't know what that is. So I decided to do a little bit of research. I already knew OpenAI was a research lab, an AI research lab. And I'm sure y'all are familiar with the company, especially since they recently created ChatGPT. They created DALL-E, which is that AI image generation tool. So they're really popular in creating a lot, but they've also created Codex. And Codex is a machine learning model that translates natural language into code. And basically, here's a little bit of like history or background on Codex. It's a version of GPT-3, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. And that uses deep learning to produce human-like text. GPT-3 is actually used by a lot of your favorite apps, like Duolingo uses it for grammar correction. The biggest difference between Codex and GPT-3 is that GPT-3 is more for like written text, like prose, and Codex is fine-tuned for programming. So they have this playground. OpenAI has this playground where you can try out Codex a little bit. So I decided to try it out, and we'll see in these next videos that they have a movie to emoji converter, right? And we can see the examples they've given us for Back to the Future. They gave us a young man, an old man, a car, and a clock. And then for Transformers, there's a car and a robot. So I was like, what will they give us for Star Wars? And for Star Wars, it gave us a star, rocket ship, and a satellite. I tried out another movie like The Devil Wears Prada, and I was like curious what this will generate for me. And it gave us like a woman dancing in a dress, lipstick, and shoes. So that seemed pretty accurate to me. I was just trying to figure out what exactly is this Codex thing. And let's go to the next video. There's this other, so we've seen how it works with something fun like movies to emojis, but I wanted to see it working with code, right? So here I write a comment that says, write a binary search algorithm. I press submit, it finishes my comment, and then it also generates the actual binary search algorithm, and it adds comments in between it. Which I thought was pretty cool. And this is something I show just to show you what's behind the scenes of GitHub Copilot. What's GitHub Copilot using to be able to generate code, since it's not magic, right? We know nothing programmatic is magic. So here are like the main features that you can think about in GitHub Copilot. Predictive code, which is the one that I've been mostly harping on and talking about so far, where you write a comment or you start writing some lines of code and it generates more code for you, or it suggests more code for you. Here's another really important one, is that you have the ability to view more suggestions with GitHub Copilot. When I first started using Copilot, I got annoyed with the initial suggestions, and I was talking to a product manager, and I was like, what if we like could see more suggestions, right? Like, what if it wasn't just that one suggestion? And he was like, Rizal, that already exists. I thought I was like being a genius. But apparently, if you hover over the initial suggestion it gives you, you'll see options to see next suggestions, previous suggestions, or if you click open GitHub Copilot, you'll see all the possible suggestions it was going to provide you. We also have Copilot Labs, which is a separate extension, but it comes complementary with GitHub Copilot Access. So one feature of Copilot Labs is you can get a translation of a code snippet. So here you can see that I took this binary search algorithm written in JavaScript, and I said, translate this code into Python, and I'm no Pythonista, but go ahead and tell me if you think that looks correct. It spit it out. It also has an explanation feature as well, where again, you highlight a snippet of code and it tells you what's going on within that snippet. It looks a little small, so I zoomed in a bit on the next slide for y'all. And basically it says step 1, we're declaring the 2 variables low and high, which will be used to represent the start and end of the search. We'll initialize low to 0 and high to the length of array -1, so on and so forth. So that's a pretty like accurate description of what was happening step by step in my code snippet. Where is this available? If you were like, this is kind of cool, I want to install it. It's available in Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, JetBrains, and NeoVim as an extension. Okay, so I know some people have concerns about, will my will my code match public code? Right? Like, will GitHub Copilot give me a suggestion that matches public code and they don't want that? There is a setting within GitHub Copilot settings where you can say you want to block that. Like, there's a very small percentage or chance. I think it's like a 1% chance that it'll suggest public code to you, but you can make it a 0% chance by going ahead and pressing block. But if that's something you don't mind about, you can just use allow. Also, we've recently coming out with another feature called Code Quote, which will tell you when 150 characters or more match some public code on the internet. So that way you can be more informed about your decision on accepting that suggestion. If you're like, oh no, I don't want this to, you can decline the suggestion. Okay, so you might be saying, girl, you just talked about all these cool features, but how is this useful for me? This isn't helpful yet. Well, I will tell you. So I know I can't talk with y'all. I love to talk with the audience, but since I can't, I'll tell you my goals as a software engineer, but go ahead and just think of your own goals. Jot it down in your brain. My goals as a software engineer have always been to code faster and cleaner, to write good documentation, to be a good mentor or mentee, and to gain understanding for new concepts quickly, right? I want when like I write code or I get a ticket, I like finish the code so quick and people read it and they're like, dang, Rizèl is so smart. This is the cleanest code I've ever read. Like I want something like that. And I'm sure maybe your goals might be similar. So I feel that Copilot continues to help me do all of these things, and I will show you how. So in terms of coding faster and cleaner, Copilot is really great at recognizing patterns, like for things like creating an API or leveraging an API, or writing unit tests. GitHub Copilot is really good at picking up on that. Also, it's really good at syntax. It removes that time needed to maybe Google for like the regex for a certain string, or spend time in a regex playground. I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I would be spending like 30 minutes in a regex playground just to write one line. Now I can just write a comment and it'll generate the code for me. And then also it helps with writing comments, right? Because it kind of works better with comments. It helps you to comment your code even better, because if an AI can understand your code, imagine how well a human can. And I know it's controversial to write comments. Some people say that is clean code. Some people say it isn't. You can always delete the comments after. But I think that it's good to have comments so that when people go back to your code, they'll be like, oh, I know exactly what's going on. You're leaving like a little bit of a trail for them, or breadcrumbs. I'll tell you a little bit about my personal experience. I feel like I write pretty messy code. People tell me, no, don't say that. Even when I've practiced this presentation in front of my friends last year, they're like, don't tell people you write messy code. But I do, it's true. And I usually go back and I refactor so that I can make things more improved. So actually, I don't want to go to the next slide yet. But so when I joined GitHub, they told me to go work with the Microsoft Visual Studio Code team to make a VS Code extension. My heart was beating. I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I never really like teamed up with a big company. And now I have to make a Visual Studio Code extension with the Visual Studio Code team. They're experts. They're going to look at my code and be like, this is dumb. So I was terrified and scared. But to my surprise, I got an email from a principal developer advocate on the team named Burke Holland. And he said, hey, Rizèl, just got to this. And here are my thoughts. Code is gorgeous, so easy to read and well commented. Love it. So maybe I was underestimating myself just a little bit, but I do want to give Copilot a little bit of credit for helping me to write cleaner code and write good comments, because I had no clue about the VS Code extension, and I leaned heavily on GitHub Copilot to show me how the API worked. Here's some examples that I found in the wild of a friend called MilMikeDev on Twitter is using GitHub Copilot to translate the words answer, question, and date in different languages. All that MilMikeDev does is put in the language code. So JP for Japanese, FR for French, and GitHub Copilot is generating the translations and properly placing them within the array. Here's another example. I talked about regex. Here's me using writing a comment that says validate a phone number, and GitHub Copilot's doing the hefty work for me. I may be typing like once or twice, but then after that, I just press tab and it generates the whole thing. I thought this can't be right, so I actually ran the file just to make sure it worked. And like as you've seen, when I ran it, it said true and false at the bottom. Okay, I also found that it's great if you speak English as a second or third language, right? I think code is very American English centric. Like if you don't speak English regularly, you're like, what's a loop? What's a function? What does this even mean? And you could totally spell things wrong all the time, right? So I found that just writing a comment in Spanish that translates to write a program or write a rock, paper, scissors game. I was able to generate all the code for it. I'm just like essentially pressing tab, and I thought it was pretty impressive that Copilot could understand Spanish. Also for documentation, GitHub Copilot is great. We don't encourage using Copilot for written prose. We encourage it for code. Like I told you, Codex is fine-tuned for programming, but I found people using it in documentation. And I think it speeds up the process because writing documentation can be tedious. And I think it's good to maybe add code snippets to your code. So here's an example. We have Unix Terminal from Twitter, or his name is also Hayden Barnes, and he's using Copilot to write some basic building prerequisites. And he wrote out what to do for Debian and Ubuntu, and then he says on SUSE, and without him even writing the rest of the command, GitHub Copilot automatically knows what to do. And he's like, wow, Copilot continues to blow my mind. We also have a principal developer advocate from Microsoft admitting that half of the documentation for the static web app CLI has been written using Copilot. Also, in being a better mentor and mentee, which is one of my other goals, I found that like when I'm a mentee, I tend to get really anxious. I'm generally an anxious person, and when I'm like peer programming with somebody, I start being like, oh my gosh, they're watching me type, and I like start pressing all the wrong numbers and letters, and I get really focused on the syntax and spelling right, and that makes me lose focus on the actual logic. And I think that makes me annoying to peer program with. But when I use GitHub Copilot, I can spend less time worrying about the syntax and more time focusing on the actual logic, which helps to like improve my experience as a mentee and to just be a good peer programmer. On the flip side, when I'm a mentor, right, I've taught a lot of people HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, all the JavaScript frameworks. But sometimes people come back and they're like, hey, Rizal, I need help with this C# work. Like they learned more, they got a job, and I'm proud of them, but I don't know C#. But what's been really helpful is using that Copilot Labs extension and getting an explanation of what that code snippet is doing or translating it into a language that I understand. That way I feel better able to guide them in the right direction. And then gaining context for new concepts. As we know, tech and software development move quickly. Every time there's a new concept, a new framework out. So that's why it's one of my goals. But I found it to be really helpful for multiple things, like studying for interviews. Sometimes when I get on Elite Code Hard, I get stuck, and then I'm like all of a sudden I'm watching Netflix or I'm taking a nap. What I've done instead is I've kind of like reverse engineered it, where I have Copilot solve the problem for me. I get an explanation of it, and I'm like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I delete that response, and then I challenge myself to solve it on my own, not to necessarily copy the exact way that they've done it, but just to be able to be like, okay, I kind of get how they've solved it, and here's how I would solve it. Also, in terms of navigating a new code base, I use that Copilot Labs feature, whether I'm new to a company or new to an open source project. I'm like, what is this random code snippet that doesn't make sense? I use the explain feature. And it's been really helpful to me in terms of demos as an advocate, as a developer advocate. A lot of my job is maybe demoing things that I've never used before, or don't have that much experience with. And I don't often have that much time, but Copilot speeds up that process for me. An example is, actually, before I go to that slide, an example is a demo that I often do where I say I wrote this tweet with Copilot. Months ago, maybe even last year, the Twitter team reached out to me and was like, hey, I want to do a Twitch stream where we show Copilot working with Twitter's API. And I was like, okay, cool. But then they said they wanted it in Python. And I was like, ooh, I don't know Python, and we got the Twitch stream is soon. So I was really nervous, but I used Copilot to create the demo. And then this next slide is me celebrating. I don't know if y'all remember, but back in July, it was a common meme where Usher was saying like, watch this. And so I wrote a tweet that says, I don't know how to write Python, and then Copilot saying, watch this. So I was really excited about that. And we're going to go ahead and see how I used Copilot to write a tweet. I recorded the video just because of time's sake, because I had a lot to show, or else I would have done it live. So we're going to start here, and basically, I don't know if y'all can see it very well, don't know how it renders on your screen, but basically here at the top, I write import the Tweepy library, it imports it for me, then I ask it to import a config file, because that has all my like secrets in it, and imports it for me. And then I say create the Tweepy client with the consumer key, consumer secret, and access tokens as an argument. And all I'm doing right now is kind of tabbing and just reformatting. So it didn't format it right, but I really haven't typed much so far. So I'm formatting it, and then I'll move on to the next line. The next thing I want to do is I want to create a variable that has the text of the tweet. And I'm like, let's see what it creates for me. And I can actually tell it what I want. So I wanted to say I am at, and I think I wrote this at GitHub Universe 2022. So I was like, I'm at GitHub Universe 2022, and I wrote this tweet with Copilot. So on the next line, we should see it actually generate that variable for me. Cool, it did it. Did you see how fast too? And then I say send the tweet with the text of the variable. So it does that for me, which is awesome. Then I tell it to print the response, and it prints the response. And then I'm like, let me just run this. I don't know if it actually is working or not. So I type Python 3 and the name of the file. And once I do that, we'll go check if it's actually on my Twitter account. So it looks like it's sent, but let's check. So once we go to my Twitter account, we do see that it says 8 seconds ago from that time. I actually wrote that tweet and sent it out. I deleted it because I have so many like tweets of me saying that. All right, so next, we saw that I sent a tweet with Copilot, but it's kind of like, why would you do that when you can just open the web app or the mobile app and send a tweet? I decided, let me figure out how I can take it a little bit of a step further. I'm really embedded into open source. So I was like, maybe there's a way we can make it easier for new contributors to find your project. So I wrote a GitHub action that actually runs this file every time you label an issue a good first issue. So basically you can see here that the action will get triggered on an issue when it's labeled. And if the issue has a label name of good first issue, then it'll like set up the Python environment, and then it'll actually run the file with these API secrets in, and the result would be something like me tweeting out, this is a good first issue with the actual issue linked. We have a little bit of more time, so I do want to like tell you guys some extra stuff, right? Like maybe you're like, how do you actually get GitHub Copilot to work and give you all of these results, right? Like how do you get the optimal results? I use this concept called prompt engineering, which is the practice of using prompts to get the output you want. In our case, our prompts are comments, right? And you need to get specific. Here are some of my top tips for prompt engineering with GitHub Copilot. You want to have a high-level task description So especially if you're starting from scratch, like this is a brand new project, nothing's in the code base, at the top of your files, you want to describe the app's purpose. And we'll show you in a second what I mean by that. You also want to provide examples. AI models use these concepts of like one-shot learning, zero-shot learning, and few-shot learning. And that is to represent the amount of examples you give it that it retrieves to understand and learn and get a more refined output. So the more examples you give it, the more refined the output would be. And then iterate for more specificity. Sometimes you'll write a comment and it just won't suggest the right thing you want. That's okay. You can go ahead and delete the suggestion, delete the comment, and make the comment more specific. For example, if you said to Copilot, get data, maybe it doesn't know exactly what data to get. Be more specific and say, get user data, get user IDs, something like that. So we can see an example here of me doing that. So I have 2 videos, right? So we're just going to create a simple to-do list. At the top of the file, I wrote my high-level task description where I say, write a to-do list in Next.js where you can add, delete, and edit items. And it starts to import the things for me. It kind of has an understanding of what I want to do. Then I make more specific comments below where now I'm setting up the state for the to-do list with default items. Then I say, okay, I want to create a state for each to-do item. And then I say, create a function that handles adding the new to-do items. It creates the function for me, right? Amazing. Then I say, create a function that handles the deleting the items. And then I say, okay, I think I skipped, just for time's sake, the edit function. Oop, I went away from it. Let me just fast forward because we don't need to watch this whole thing. I skipped the editing for a little bit because of time's sake, but then I say I want to render a couple things. I want to render an input field with a button and the list of items. So then I just press tab and it's generating all of these like components and elements for me. It generated the head component. It put in, let's see, cool. Oh, I think it was missing a parenthesis, but now we see that it put in the heading 1. Now I'm putting in the input and it's filling in all like the props that I need to pass in here, like on change and the value. And I put in the button as well, and it passes in the on click function for me. And I put an unordered list as well. And you see sometimes maybe I have to like close it for it, or close the div. I keep doing that when I want to pause, sorry. But I'm trying to close the div and maybe Copilot doesn't always close it, but we can see like in my browser, I'll test it out and I'll say, okay, cool, learn to code. I was able to add some elements to the list. I can delete it. Looks like it's working. Copilot in just a couple of minutes generated this very simple UI. Here's another one where I make a simple markdown editor and I give it that high-level task description again, and I make it super detailed. So I say, create a basic markdown editor in Next.js. And I say with the following features. So I'm telling it all the things that I want within this markdown editor. I want it to be able to use React hooks. I want it to, let's see what else I want it to do. I want the text area to be there where users can actually write the markdown. I want a live preview of the markdown text. And I wanted to support basic things like headers, bold, italic, links, all that. And I wanted to use the React Markdown NPM package. So we're going to go ahead and see that happen in a couple seconds right after I finish this really long comment. And this is just a strategy that's worked for me, but maybe it doesn't work for everybody, or maybe you don't like that. But this is a really good way, at least for me, to ensure that I get the results I want from Copilot. So once I do that, I'm installing React Markdown, and I want Copilot to get started. I guess I didn't install it yet. Give me a second. And yeah, now it's importing all the NPM packages that I'll need. It starts trying to actually create the component for me. It generates all 26 lines. And I know you're like, a markdown editor that's only 26 lines. It doesn't have any styling yet, but it pretty much works. I'm going to try. And then what we'll notice, right, is I'm not completely happy with the way that what it's generated, right? So I go back and I iterate for specificity. I delete that suggestion that it gave me and I say, I wanted it to have like a default state or a default value for the state that says type markdown here. So that's my other suggestion of getting more specific with things. And we see now that it's changed to that. I try it out. We're able to do headings. We're able to do like bullet points. We're able to do like bold and italic and all this other stuff, which is pretty cool. I'll let it finish just so you can see. And I can in the future, I could probably go ahead and try to use Copilot to style this, but this is just a basic example. Here are some extra features that are coming out soon. We have, if you love ChatGPT, we have Copilot Chat coming out, where within your editor, you can ask Copilot coding questions, just like you would with ChatGPT. So here we have one of my coworkers asking Copilot Chat to create a bicep template for her, which is like some kind of DevOps ARM thing that I'm not, or Azure thing that I'm not really super delved into, but it generates all the code and it kind of explains the step-by-step plan. We also have the Copilot CLI, sometimes writing bash scripts or even remembering Git commands can be hard. So what you can do is you can write in natural language what you're trying to do. So for example, here, maybe that you wanted to list JavaScript files. It gives you a query of how to do that. And you can always go back and be more specific and tell it, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. I want to change that. But those are coming out soon. So you can feel free to sign up on the wait list for them. But wrapping up, we saw that GitHub Copilot can send tweets, and I hope you were able to see that you can use it to level up your career at any level. I have a couple of resources that you can check out. There's a blog post I wrote called 8 Things You Didn't Know You Could Do with GitHub Copilot. I'd encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning more. I also have another blog post called Prompt Engineering with GitHub Copilot that you can find as well. And if you wanted to connect with me or get the slides for this presentation, you can go ahead and scan these QR codes, but I'll also tweet it out on Twitter so that you can get access to it. And you can also feel free to connect with me. So just to remind you, my handle is @BlackGirlBites. And I wanted to thank Craft Conference for allowing me to speak, but I'll leave the floor open now for any questions.
Thank you very much, Rizel. Questions are raining. So let's start. We have 10 minutes for questions. Since a lot of companies restrict the usage of Copilot, how do you evaluate the security and privacy risks that come with Copilot? Tough question.
Yeah, that is a tough question. And if there, by the way, if there are like more legal questions, I may skip them just because I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to talk as if I know all of this stuff. But we are putting things in place for the security and other risks that y'all are concerned about, or which is very valid. Some of the things are we have an AI security vulnerability tool that will like basically make sure that it's not putting in any like SQL injections or putting up any API tokens. And then specifically for Copilot for Business, the way that your data is handled is much different, right? It doesn't take, if you're using Copilot for individuals, it is looking at the data of like which suggestions you accept and reject and stuff like that. But for Copilot for Business, it's not, I think it's a misconception that we're taking all your data, but it's only taking your data for that ephemeral time to actually make the suggestion for you. After that, we just drop all the data, and the Copilot for Business administrator, so whoever is the admin on at your team or at your company, has a lot of control about like how Copilot is used and like how the data and security is used. So I would, if your companies are interested, I would actually talk to like Copilot, I mean not Copilot, GitHub support engineers and customer success engineers to see like how do you make sure that your team could still use GitHub Copilot, but without it being a privacy or security risk for y'all? Because we're not taking in the data from any businesses. We're not grabbing the code and keeping it for ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have control over data that Copilot receive?
If you have the Copilot for Business account, yes, you do. You can control what type of data that it receives. Yeah. Oh, my cat is in the way. Get out of here.
Was it a cat?
Yeah, my cat is
Nice.
it's a big cat. Hold on.
Okay. Well, he is the co-pilot of yours? Or she? Okay. When will Copilot X be in general access?
Okay, I can't necessarily reveal that to you, but very soon, Copilot Chat may be out, and just stay tuned for when the rest will be out.
Okay, you were talking about the business and Copilot general. So Copilot for business and Copilot for individuals. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so Copilot for individuals is basically access just for your account, right? Like you have access to Copilot. But for Copilot for business, on the other hand, it enables maybe your engineering manager or whoever is like at the top that is an admin for your team to be able to add and remove users easily. That way, we're not like individually giving each user access to Copilot and it's stressful to manage. Basically, you just say, oh, we have a new person on the team. We'll grant them access to Copilot for business, or if they left the team, you'll just remove them from the team. So basically, anyone who's part of your GitHub org will get access. And then you can also control, like I was mentioning, how the privacy is used, all the policy controls and all the settings. So that's the main difference.
Okay. Wouldn't you agree that you should only use the tool if you can verify its results? For example, if you translate to Japanese, you cannot verify the results.
That is a good question. Yeah, I guess so. So I encourage people, right? I don't think that if you're like a beginner and have never written code before, that you should use Copilot, right? I prefer if you like have the fundamentals of coding already. Or you understand the logic, right? So I've been using Copilot to maybe like write a language I didn't know. I've used it for C# yesterday or Python, right? I'm not really familiar with those, but I do understand like different logic in code. I think there's a lot of ways out there to verify. Like we have different things to just make sure that that's actually right. So yeah, use it if you want that. I encourage you if you want that extra confidence that what you're writing is correct. I would say get that verification.
Okay. Is it possible to use Copilot for modifying or refactoring existing code project structure?
Not yet. Not for project structure. I know we're coming out with Copilot for code bases, but that seems like it's very far into the future on the roadmap. You can use it to like maybe refactor a small line of code. I have seen Copilot Labs has another feature that I didn't show here called code brushes, where if you highlight a line, you can say, make this more readable, create documentation for it, things like that. So you can refactor bits and lines of code, but not the whole architecture or structure of your code base.
Okay, let's see Andre Tom's question. Is it possible to use the Copilot without leaving the comments in the code?
Yes, you can use it with if you were already writing code, it could start to follow the pattern for you. So like let's say you wrote like a get request and then you want to write a post request, it should be able to, or it has for me picked up on that pattern. But I found that like the comments help to guide it. And the reason why I made this talk in this way is because like when GitHub Copilot first came out, people will be like, it's not doing anything, but they weren't typing anything. I'm like, Copilot's not going to read your mind. So you kind of have to find a way to communicate with it through your comments and through your code. I'm just suggesting the comments to be able to provide more context. But if your code base already has a lot of code in it and that it can pick up that context from, it should be fine.
Okay, let's have a last question. Can you train Copilot with code from your organization and make it prefer that code first?
Not yet necessarily. It'll just pick up the code within that file and other open tabs within your editor. But it's not we're not there yet where you're like taking your whole code base and training it as yet. I think Copilot for Docs might be the closest thing to that.
Thanks a lot, Rizel. We have a little present for you from Crafthub. This is a portrait of you design. We will send a personal portrait. We'll send it to you, and also a small thing from Budapest to make some notes for the next Copilot presentation. I would like to ask for a warm applause for Rizel's presentation.
Thank you.